I love this country.
Both of the stories of Michael Cohen tonight, as told by these two sets of prosecutors, the White House trying to say this isn't about the president is now sort of officially nuts.
No. But what did we actually discover? Let's start with the Cohen filing. Again, the recommendation for his sentencing, which is coming up next week.
What we learned was that there's no evidence, again, of Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, and certainly nothing with the president personally. We learned that Michael Cohen is a kind of a rather unscrupulous individual who sought to enrich himself through the campaign and did some pretty sleazy deals after the campaign. But in fact, there is no suggestion whatsoever that the president did anything wrong, committed any crimes, or certainly had any contact with Russians. A lot of hype, a lot of sound, a lot of noise, a lot of drama, but no substance in terms of the president of the United States.
We do know from the special counsel's filing that he's given them plenty of information on Trump himself.
Laura, what people forget is Barack Obama was the president of the United States. His intelligence community was tasked with making sure that no outside entity interfered with the outcome of our election. No one talked about it. Donald Trump was a private citizen. He had nothing to do with the integrity of the ballot process or the integrity of how the election was going to be administered. That all fell under the Obama administration, the Comeys, the Clappers, the Brennans of the world. There was no collusion. There was no cooperation. There was no coordination between anybody on the Trump campaign.
The word conspiracy was thrown all around. In major American newspapers tonight, the word conspiracy is used over and over and over again. Conspiracy with the Russians. Conspiracy with the Russians.
Michael Cohen had nothing to do with the campaign. He wasn't a campaign employee. He didn't have a campaign email address. He wasn't compensated by the campaign. He was a Trump Organization employee, of which literally he was 20 floors apart from where the campaign was. He had no operational authority whatsoever for the campaign. He couldn't make decisions on behalf of the campaign.
I think we should note that Mueller has not charged anybody, not Cohen, not Manafort, not Flynn, not Papadopoulos, not Gates. Nobody has been charged with taking part in a criminal conspiracy to influence the 2016 election.
Thank you. Well, today was actually the second time that Donald Trump was accused of committing federal crimes by federal prosecutors in federal court right here in New York City.
Say what?
Well, they're not going to be making a case against the President of the United States, no matter what their evidence is, because the Justice Department has ruled that you cannot indict a sitting president. They ruled twice on that, once in a Democratic administration under Bill Clinton and once in the Nixon administration. But it's very important to realize what the prosecutors said in those pleadings. They said that Michael Cohen violated the law and that he was, according to them, was instructed by, number one, the candidate to make the payments. They didn't say that the candidate told him to make illegal payments. They were very careful not to say that the candidate instructed him to violate the law. It's a very, very important part of the pleading. They have not alleged that the President of the United States violated the law. They've alleged that Michael Cohen did.
Now, there is actually nothing in the Constitution that says the President of the United States cannot be indicted and charged with a crime. There is nothing in the Constitution that says the President of the United States can never be charged with a crime and never put on trial in court while he is serving as President of the United States.
Lines like, the President, Donald Trump, surrounded with a lot of bad guys that have maybe done some bad things in the past, and it doesn't really rise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors.
Aaron Burnett, out front tonight, the walls closing in on President Donald Trump.
It's not surprising that Donald Trump is increasing his attacks. The walls are closing in on him.
It feels like the walls are closing in on the White House. It feels as if the walls are closing in here.
I think the walls of justice are closing in on President Trump.
Increasingly desperate, feeling like the walls are closing in.
The president clearly feels all the walls closing in on him in terms of the Russia
Russia investigation can start to see the walls closing in.
He feels the walls closing in on him.
Everybody he talks to says the walls are closing in.
The walls closing in on him.
He knows that the walls are closing in.
The walls may be closing in higher up at the White House.
Feeling like the walls are closing in around him?
Yes.
Does it seem like the walls could be closing in on this president?
Feels like we are finally at a tipping point. The walls are closing in on President Trump.
And that's why there's this sense of the walls closing in.
As it appears the walls are closing in terms of the Mueller investigation.
The walls are closing in.
The walls are closing in.
I do feel that he feels the walls closing in on him.
Legal walls are closing in on Donald Trump tonight.
From a Democratic perspective, this is the president feels like the walls are closing in.
As he feels the walls are closing in.
Tom, the walls are closing in. As you say, I'm joking. That's what we keep hearing again and again from the mainstream media.
It's merely a relatively recent Justice Department tradition, outlined only in memo form, that says the president should not be indicted. And so the only conceivable reason why Donald Trump has not been indicted as a co-conspirator in the Cohen case is that he won the presidential election, that he conspired with Michael Cohen to illegally effect. If Donald Trump lost the election and federal prosecutors were pursuing this same case, he would be facing exactly the same consequences as Michael Cohen.
Say what?
Will Donald Trump be the only president in history accused by federal prosecutors of committing federal crimes who does not then face impeachment for those crimes? Now, you may have noticed that I have not yet included Donald Trump in our coverage of the Republican presidential campaign this season, and that is because he is obviously never going to be president. He is obviously never going to be the Republican nominee for president, and he is obviously never going to be a candidate for president.
Where's the hammer? Is it on the, go up on the other floor. Somebody go up there and stop the hammering.
That pivot. Yeah, forget the collusion. Let's talk about campaign finance. We've been talking for 2 years about how this is Trump and Russia conspiring to fix the election.
Molly.
And that is, I think, such an important issue. The trust of the American people in our law enforcement agencies and whether they can handle when someone who they don't like is elected president and whether that person has the right to run his administration or whether anyone who helped that person will have their entire life gone through. That is something that can be very damaging to the health of the republic. And